But I want to start off with Florida. It's turning into a fascist hellhole. It just is. Right. If you're wondering what fascism looks like in the United States, it is Florida. So, why am I talking about this? What's going on there? So, we've just had this rash of anti trans legislation, and Florida seems to be ground zero for all of this stuff. Want to bring your attention to the Florida Don't Say Gay bill. You guys remember that? You guys remember last year there was this big stink over in Florida because they passed a law which would require all schools to not speak about sexuality at all in the slightest, not to even mention it whatsoever, not to have any discussion at all over gender, over sexuality of any kind, that kind of thing. And it had this sort of cooling effect where teachers and stuff didn't know what to do. Remember all of that? Well, the excuse they gave us for that was that, well, it would only apply to kindergarten to third grade. So it's only going to be there for the very, very small, itty-bitty little children who should not be having discussions of gender or sexuality of any kind. That's what they told us, right? And I'm pretty sure most people, most conservatives, saw that and thought that was a good thing. You know, little Billy, who's 9 years old, doesn't have any reason to talk about sexuality and stuff like that, and that's how they rationalized it in their minds. Lo and behold, the Florida Don't Say Gay bill now applies to all grades, all the way up to 12th grade, including high school. Where did all this happen? Well, what actually happened here, I just want to show you guys a story before we get into that. There is a teacher who is being put under investigation for showing a Disney movie to her classroom. The movie in question was called Strange World, which was released in 2019, I think. I never actually saw this one, but apparently it was about some kids who need to go out and find some kind of MacGuffin for one reason or another. I can't really remember. I haven't actually seen it myself. But what happened is that there is a gay character in this movie. I think it may even actually be the main character. And somebody complained. Well, here's the thing, is that the Don't Say Gay law was only supposed to apply up to third grade. And this teacher and her class are actually fifth graders. So this should not apply to them. So they should be able to talk about sexuality and stuff like that in a classroom. Fifth grade is about that time, 10, 11 years old, is about that time you start hitting puberty. I remember in fifth grade, that's when they had the talk, and all of the girls got to go off into their special class for a few days and learn about girl stuff that happens down with the girly bits, the periods and tampons and whatnot. They took all the girls off to go discuss those things right around fifth grade, if I remember right. So this is kind of when you should, right around that time, your kids should know the birds and the bees, and if they don't, this is when they learn it in school. Health and reproduction class, that kind of thing. That's right, pretty much what we've all decided as a society right around that time. So it is really not inappropriate to discuss these types of things with children of that age. But apparently it is if you live in Florida. So I would like to show you guys this one little TikTok here. I actually broke down and started a TikTok because it seems like that's just how people in the world communicate nowadays. I didn't start one, I signed up for it. I don't know if I'm going to actually put any videos there. But here's what we're going to be looking at. This is the TikTok here. Let me put that down in the chat for you guys so that you can see it.
Hi, my name is Jenna Barbie.
Hang on, Jenna Barbie. We will get to you in a moment. So this is what we're looking at now. And Jenna Barbie is the teacher who is being investigated for showing a Disney movie. Let's listen to what she has to say.
I am the teacher that is under investigation with the Florida Department of Education for indoctrination for showing a Disney movie. I just wanted to come here and tell you my truth, my story about what actually happened. So I'm a first-year teacher and a first-time mom, so needless to say, had a lot of learning to do this year. So how the situation came to be, our students had standardized testing all morning. So some students didn't finish, so in the afternoon, part of my students who didn't finish went to a different teacher's classroom, and she split her kids amongst the other 5th grade teachers. So due to the fact that they spent their morning state standardized testing, I had a lot of students not in my room who typically are, and I had another teacher's students in my room. I thought it would be a great time to give them a brain break by showing a movie that related to what we were learning about in school. Other 5th grade classes did this as well. So I want to...
I like that term, brain break. I think I'm going to start using that in my everyday life. I just need a brain break, man. My brain is too fucked up. I have to take a break. Continuing.
Bring up the issue that I'm in trouble for. I was told by every teacher and mentor at our school that our method for approval by administration of showing movies was to have a signed parent permission slip for PG movies. I had that from the beginning of the year. The whole 5th grade team had signed permission slips for PG movies with no objections to specific content. I actually had one student who did have objection to specific content, not showing the Buzz Lightyear movie, but she wasn't in my classroom anymore, so it wasn't a big deal. The reason I was turned in is because one of the split students was a school board member's daughter. That school board member is currently on a rampage to get rid of every form of representation out of our schools. She even spent days this past week going to all the high schools to get rid of anything that had to do with representation whatsoever. She even had admin escort her to a teacher's classroom that had a sticker of a black hand and a white hand holding hands, and the white hand had a different color fingernail for every finger. So the school board member called the Department of Education on me.
Super conservative school board member imposing her will on everybody else because she doesn't like gay people. Getting rid of all forms of representation. Conservatives on a personal crusade to enforce their will on everybody else. See, it's funny. It's funny how whenever these things happen, the bigots and the racist people and the homophobes, they always have to kind of go above and beyond what the rules are, right? Because it kind of sounds like this woman here, this teacher, was obeying the rules. Does it not? She got signed permission slips. What does that mean? That means that the parent signed off on them watching these movies. They didn't have any particular objection to any of these movies. So if they got a signed permission slip, then that means this woman, this school board member, also signed that permission slip. Did she not? I mean, she just said she got it from every parent of every student in her class, and that's what they're supposed to do. That permission slip removes the school of liability, by the way. That's why you get those permission slips in the first place. If you remember back when you were in school, and if you wanted to go on a field trip or something like that, the permission slip basically says, hey, we have permission to take your kid off campus, and if any shit happens to him, it's not our fault. Right? That's what it means. It means if the kid dies in a car crash because some maniac hits the bus or whatever on the way to the air show or wherever, or the museum or something, wherever they're going, then you can't sue us because you gave us permission to take them off, right? Same thing with this. This is basically saying, hey, we're going to watch this movie, and if there's bad words or tits in it or something like that, you can't complain because you gave permissions, and you gave permission for a PG-rated movie. And sometimes PG-rated movies have things like violence in them or, nipples or whatever. At least they used to. Right? So that's what that means. So the school board member already gave her permission. But now she's starting to flip her shit. Why? Why? Because she's a bad parent. Let's let the teacher talk a little bit more before we comment on that. Let's continue here. There's only about 4 minutes left of this. Let's continue.
For indoctrination before ever coming to our school to talk with me or admin about the situation. When she did come to our school, she came as a school board member, and our principal said, no, you can come as a concerned parent, but then you need to schedule a meeting. So she did. She came, and later that day, and admin was in and out of my room, pulled me out, and we had a meeting, and I understood her perspective that, okay, she really doesn't want this shown at her house. I I never saw that perspective before, so I didn't think it was a big deal. But seeing how upset she was, I told her I understand my lesson. That's that. But come to find out, she had already reported me, and there was nothing she can do about it. So I chose this movie because it relates to our curriculum. Our unit at the time was Earth Science and Ecosystems, and
I like the language she used there, by the way. She said she didn't like this shown in our house. That's the language she chose, right? So that was the school board member, the conservative school board member, saying, I don't show these types of movies in my house. Here's the thing, folks. School is not your house. You don't control what happens in the classroom. And I don't think you should. As a parent, I don't think you really should have too much control of what happens in that classroom. Because if you wanted to have 100% control of your child's education, you would homeschool them. That's the answer for that, right? If you want to dictate every single thing that your kid is and not allowed to see and not allowed to watch, whatever, not allowed to do when they're at school, then you should homeschool them, right? But when you send them off to public school, then you relinquish that responsibility. And personally, I think that's bad to begin with. I don't think you should be doing that to begin with, because I think children need a degree of freedom when it comes to stuff that they learn about, stuff that they investigate, things that they experience in the world. I don't think your parents should control every single thing that your kid. I mean, this is just my own personal opinion, all right? But I don't think your parents should have 100% control over every single thing your kid watches, every single thing your kid does, every single thing that ever. No, I don't think so. I think if you see something that they're doing and you don't like it, then yeah, you have a right to tell them to stop doing that. Don't watch this thing. You know, like if I were to come into my son's bedroom and watch and see him watching Matt Walsh, for example, right? Then I would reserve the right to be like, hey, don't watch this fucking guy, like, or watching Nick Fuentes or something. I would turn that Nazi shit off and be like, no, you're not allowed to watch Nick Fuentes. I don't care. So I understand that. But at the same time, it's not, when you're in a classroom, it should not be up to one parent to decide what all of the other kids are allowed to learn about in that classroom. No, not really. It should be up to the school. And if you don't like it, you take them out of the school, is what you do. You pony up, you send your kid off to the private school, you homeschool them, you get private tutors, whatever it is you do. But you don't sit there and be like, no, all of the other children are not allowed to learn about this or that because I don't like it. No, kiss my ass. That's the right response to that. The right response to that is blow me, because what about the other parents that are A-okay with it and even want their kids to learn about these things, right? You should, if your kid needs to know about sexuality, they should learn about it. Should they not? I mean, I think they should learn about it. Let's continue on with a little bit. Let's let her talk a little bit more.
how they interact, plants, humans, animals. So this movie is perfect. My thought process was, what a better way to showcase all these standards, along with huge lessons of overcoming differences, spreading kindness, communication, and chasing your dreams, a lot of which are in our social emotional Florida Best standards as well. Is a character in the movie LGBTQ? Absolutely. Is that why I showed it? No. I have a lot of 5th grade students who have come to me this year, long before showing this movie, talking about how they're part of that community as well. And it's not a big deal to me, so I just said, okay, that's awesome, do you. Not pushing anything, just being accepting. That's what I do. Does that have anything to do with why I showed it? Not in the slightest. The LGBTQ aspect of the movie, they're harmless. It's just a talked about crush, and it's only a couple lines in total scene time of just over 2 minutes. The parents in the movie kiss a lot, and that wasn't even brought up, and that's the issue.
So that's a good point right there, right? So, like she said, apparently in this movie, there is barely any LGBTQ content, like at all, right? Barely any. Yeah, like she said, something like 2 minutes of LGBTQ content. And there's actually no kissing. There's no, making out. Nothing like that. There's not even a gay relationship in the movie. Like, just one of the kids sort of lets on that they have, like, a crush on another kid, and, like, that's it. And, however, there's plenty of depictions of straight sexuality in this movie. And that's the thing, is that, nobody ever complains when you have, like, opposite sex couples doing their thing in any media, right? No one ever complains about that. When a man kisses a woman in any movie or TV show or cartoon or whatever, made for kids or not, no one ever complains about that stuff. It's only when it comes to the depictions of sexuality that don't fit the normal heteronormative worldview, right? And that is kind of bullshit, because the law in Texas says any representations or discussion of sexuality of any kind. That's what it says. It does not. The law doesn't actually single out gay people or anything like that, but that's how it's being enforced. And that's something that you got to remember, right? It's vague like that on purpose. It's so that it will always be enforced. The reason why the laws like this are vague is so that they can be enforced selectively. But we'll come to that in a little bit. So anyway, I left that down there. You can watch the rest of this if you want, but she basically goes on to say that it's unfair and stuff like that. Which it is, right? So this teacher is being investigated now under Florida's Don't Say Gay bill. Please remember that it was supposed to only apply to up to 3rd grade. She's a 5th grade teacher. Why is she being investigated under this law if the law says it only is supposed to apply from kindergarten to 3rd grade? It's because recently, as of last April, the Florida School Board expanded the Don't Say Gay law to apply up to grade 12. So now it applies all the way up into high school for all grades. This includes adults, by the way. So you notice that in high school, when you're in 12th grade, many students turn 18 years old. So this will apply for now this is not just minors now that this is affecting. This is also affecting adults who should have full rights. When you're an adult, you're supposed to have, when you're 18 years old and you're an adult, you are supposed to have full rights in this country, right? You're no longer a minor. That means all of the shit applies now. Freedom of speech, everything, right? So you should be allowed to talk about whatever you want. You should be allowed to dress however you want. You should be allowed to have sex with whoever you want, who's also another adult, right? But this law is going to apply to them as well. This was done at the request of Ron DeSantis, so there is some legal wiggle room here, because the law itself says that it only applies up to 3rd grade. It is the school board which is enforcing it all the way up to 12th grade. So the legal repercussions that a teacher can get under this, it can lead to them being fired. It can lead to them losing their teaching credentials, like for being suspended or losing them permanently, stuff like that. It could, if they have tenure, doesn't matter, right? Because one thing is, once you're a teacher and you have tenure, it's supposed to be really hard to fire you and all that stuff. This basically classifies, violating this law is classified as willful insubordination, and that's one of the ways in which you can lose your tenure. So this is why teachers like this, like that lady in that TikTok there, was freaking out, because this could cost her job. Because one person complained, one person was stuck up about watching a Disney movie. This woman can now lose her job because of the crusades of one particular conservative school board member. What it does is it has a chilling effect across everybody else. It's like, if you see somebody lose their job over something really fucking stupid like this, then if you're a teacher there, are you going to speak up? I mean, the thing is, this law is written incredibly vaguely. So just a quick recap of what the law actually says, right? It bans all lessons on sexual orientation and gender identity, unless required by existing state standards or as part of a reproductive health and instruction class that students can opt out of. I don't know if you remember I remember when I was in junior high school, there was always one or two kids who got to go to the library whenever we started talking about sexy stuff. They always got to go study or whatever. And I don't know, maybe they're must have been conservative Christians or something, who knows. But yeah, that's the only time you're allowed to talk about it. So basically in health class is the only time you're even allowed to mention sexuality at all. But you notice that it says existing state standards. Well, who do you think is going to come up with those standards? Well, it's going to be Ron DeSantis and his conservative Christian friends that he packed on the board there. And they're the ones who are going to get to decide what those standards are, what are and are not allowed to be even discussed, not just talked about, but discussed, right? So you notice it says discussion. That is extreme. Like, what does that even mean, discussion, right? Does that mean the teacher has to instigate it? What if a student brings it up as part of the discussion, right? Here's a scenario. Say you have a classroom assignment to draw your family. Like, say, you're in 3rd grade or whatever, 2nd grade, something like that. And they go, draw your mommy and your daddy and your sisters and your brothers and draw your house and all that. That's a common thing, right? And the kid happens to have 2 mommies or 2 daddies. And so let's say they draw a picture of 2 daddies. And then they want to talk about it with the rest of the class. These are my 2 daddies. They're Phil and Bill. They have a dog. That's their names. I just made those names up. Or something like that. Whatever, right? And she wants to talk about her family. Is that considered discussion? I mean, the child brought it up. Is that considered discussion? Is the teacher supposed to be like, no, little Mandy, you are not allowed to talk about your family. Everybody else is allowed to talk about theirs, but you're not allowed to talk about yours because the law says just the fact that they're gay, that your parents are the same, you have 2 daddies, that is against the law to even speak about. Is that what they're supposed to say? Now, if another kid in that class goes home and like their parents say, oh, what did you learn about in school today? Oh, well, I learned that Mandy has 2 daddies. And then let's say those parents are a bunch of stuck-up Christian assholes. Do they then get to go sue the school? Because that's what the law says. The law says that a parent can petition to start an investigation. And then if it's not resolved basically to their satisfaction, they get to sue for damages. So the school has to put together some kind of punishment. They have to put together a disciplinary action. They have to put that together and basically punish any teacher that breaks this law. And if the parent does not like what that punishment is, if it's not resolved to their satisfaction, they get to sue. And then the school becomes liable. And then they can sue for damages. And the thing is, it's not limited to just one person. So let's say 5 people in that classroom now, their kids go home and tell their parents, yay, Mandy told us they have 2 dads, and now suddenly there's 5 lawsuits. Do you think the school is going to allow that teacher to keep her job after that? Probably not. The teachers are scared shitless over all of this. That's what this law actually says. Here's another one. So teachers, for example, were being directed, like, if they're, like, married to someone of the same gender, they were told to not bring photos of their spouse to school, stuff like that. Don't have a photograph of your wife or your husband on your desk there, right? I'm sure that the teacher next door, who's in a heteronormative marriage, she can probably keep her photo of her husband all she wants on her desk. See, and that's the thing. It's vague like that on purpose. They made the law vague like this on purpose in order to spread fear, essentially. So that people don't know what the law actually is. So they're afraid of tripping it. They're afraid of breaking it. And that's how you actually get compliance, is through fear. It's fascism 101. It's the same kind of thing, authoritarian fascism. It's the same thing that people did in East Germany when everybody was afraid that the secret police were spying on them. And in real life, there wasn't anywhere close to enough people to monitor every single phone call and every single. You couldn't do it back then. And you just got people informed, ratting on their neighbors, stuff like that. Same thing in Nazi Germany, too. Oh, this guy's hiding Jews in his basement, whatever. Right? Because they're afraid. They're afraid of what's going to happen to them. This law is vague enough to that, let's say you see an instance of this happening and nobody complains, and if you don't report it, that also means that you can be subject to the same disciplinary measures as well. For example, if you see a parent and a teacher talking and the kid's mentioning that they're gay or something, and you don't report it, and then later on it gets out that you saw them and you didn't say anything, you could also lose your job. So that's going to lead to teachers turning each other in because they don't want to lose their jobs. I mean, remember, the teachers in Florida don't make a shitload of money to begin with. I mean, not really. They don't really have much in the way of worker protections to begin with anyway. Would you even be a teacher in Florida if you had to put up with conditions like this? I mean, it doesn't even seem to be worth it because there's no guidelines. There's no, and they did that on purpose. There's no guidelines. So the reason why there's no guidelines is so that people like this board member, this conservative Christian board member, can go around and arbitrarily decide what is and isn't considered sexuality, what is and isn't against the rules, without being held accountable to anyone, without having to clear it with anybody so that they can enforce their will on everybody else. Because this is what fascists do. This is authoritarians. This is how they work. On purpose. And it's done like that so that they can decide you guys are okay because you align with me ideologically, but you guys over here aren't. So that's why all of the depictions of heteronormative sexuality will never be prosecuted. Even though the law says you're not allowed to do that either, because the law is vague. Law says any discussions of sexuality at all. But those will never get prosecuted. No one will ever get in trouble for that. No one will ever get in trouble for showing a picture of their husband. A woman will never get in trouble for showing a picture of her husband. Or a man will never get in trouble for showing a picture of his wife on his desk. Or showing a movie where a husband and wife kiss. Or anything like that. Or talking about Henry VIII and his 16th, had his wife, his 16th wife or whatever, I don't even know, had her beheaded or something like that. They will never, ever get in trouble for that because it's not, that's the design. The design is so that it doesn't have to be enforced equally at all. So now that's arbitrarily up to 12th grade, and that's the thing. They told us that it would only go up to 3rd grade. They said it was to protect the little children. They were lying. Everybody, if you didn't know it was a lie when this first got passed, if you didn't know that this was going to happen when this first got passed, then I hope you learned your lesson. Of course, they all did know. Everybody knew. Especially when it came to the Christians, they all knew too. This was the plan to begin with. This was the idea. The idea was to always have it to apply to every child. That was always the plan. Anyone who tells you otherwise, like Ron DeSantis, is lying to you. Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.